was set next to the body. So this was the earlier knowledge about the brain. Now the brain is having a 2% of the total body weight. If you take 1.4 kg of a 70 kg man, so it's only 2% of the body. However, it takes the 15 to 20% of the blood supply. Though it is 2% of the body weight, but it takes this one. So by any chance, if this supply is lost, or if it goes down to the 10% or 7%, person will suffer from a stroke. So that we are going to study now briefly. The brain attack results from the inadequate perfusion of the blood into the brain tissue. Brain tissues are extremely sensitive to hypoxia and die off in a matter of few seconds, few minutes. So within 2 minutes, the neurons they keep dying. So that means it requires continuous supply of the oxygen and the glucose. These are my research areas in the laboratory. These are my research areas. So some of our students work with the glioma. Glioma is a brain tumor. It's the deadliest brain tumor. We get the samples from the Kim's hospital. We also do a rat experiments and also with the cell cultures. So the other one is the cerebral ischemia. It's a stroke model. We create the animal with a paralysis and we work with it. So stem cells also some part we have worked earlier sometime. Then there's a PNS injury like a spinal cord injury. Then epilepsy, all of you must be knowing this. This is a meningioma is another brain tumor that affects the meninges of the brain. Then cerebral malaria, it's a malaria, it infects the brain when it is not treated, and particularly the plasmodium falciparum infects this one. So these are the areas that we are working, and one of them is cerebral ischemic stroke, and some of them we will discuss in this talk. Now, this is the brain simply, it's called as the total, if we divide the brain into so different lobes, it's a frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. So they're all the named after the bones or skull bones. So these are the basically these are the ones. But so this is the ridge between the frontal lobe and parietal lobe. This is more important one. So here is the actual motor cortex falls here. Motor cortex and sensory cortex. This is the motor cortex. This is sensory cortex. If somebody is having a paralysis, stroke, so this area is affected. This area is affected. So this area controls the legs and hands movements. That's how the stroke infects. Now, so maybe briefly I will show the video of the brain anatomy. Hope this will work out. Let us see. You are all there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
Sir.
sir.
I hope this is interesting. Let us see.
Yes, sir.
Outer layer, the dura. To see the two inner layers, the pia and the arachnoid, we need to add the brain itself to the picture. We're looking at the right cerebral hemisphere. The blood vessels on its surface have been filled with red latex. The surface of the brain is richly folded. An outward fold is called a gyrus, an inward fold is a sulcus. The pia is almost invisibly thin. It's just the glossy surface that we see here. To see the extent of the pia, we'll look at a frontal section. Here's a typical sulcus. The pia extends down into each sulcus and back up onto the next gyrus. Each sulcus contains blood vessels which lie just outside the pia. Each vessel that enters the brain carries a sleeve of pia with it. Now we'll add the arachnoid to the picture. This is the arachnoid. It's a delicate, transparent membrane. Here's the arachnoid again. Unlike the pia, the arachnoid doesn't extend into the sulci. It bridges over from one gyrus to the next. In this specimen, the subarachnoid space is empty. Here, we're injecting water to fill it. Over most of the brain, the subarachnoid space is narrow, but in a few places it's quite wide. Notably here, below the cerebellum, here above the cerebellum and here in front of the top of the brainstem. These spaces are called cisterns. Outside the arachnoid is the dura. We'll add it to the picture. The dura is a much tougher layer of tissue than either the pia or the arachnoid. The dura has almost no attachment to the arachnoid. The dura can be separated from the overlying bone, but is normally quite closely attached to it. Now we'll add the rest of the dura to the picture. Here's the intact dura. These are branches of the middle meningeal artery, which runs in the thickness of the dura. To look at the openings in Here's the brain. Much the largest part of the brain is the cerebrum. The cerebrum is partly divided in the midline into two cerebral hemispheres. Below the cerebrum and separate from it is the smaller cerebellum. The cerebrum and the cerebellum both grow out of the brainstem. The brainstem becomes continuous below with the spinal cord. The brain is Here's the cerebrum with the brainstem attached and the cerebellum removed. The functions of the cerebrum include the senses of vision, hearing, smell, touch, and spatial perception, and also speech and language, memory, thought, and voluntary action. The cerebrum is formed mainly by the two cerebral hemispheres. These are separated in the midline by the falx, which occupies this longitudinal cerebral fissure. Though they look hemispherical from in front, the shape of each cerebral hemisphere is more complex when seen from the side. In front, this part, the frontal lobe, occupies the anterior cranial fossa. This part below, the temporal lobe, occupies the middle cranial fossa. This part behind, the occipital lobe, lies above the tentorium. The two cerebral hemispheres are connected across the midline by the corpus callosum, which runs all the way from here in front to here behind. The two cerebral hemispheres are connected below by the two cerebral peduncles converging on the brainstem. They're also connected by the structures of this area, the floor of the third ventricle. To see these connecting structures better, we'll look at a brain that's been divided in the midline. Here's the corpus callosum. This is the cerebral peduncle. The third ventricle is here. Here's the third ventricle in the model. It's quite narrow from side to side. This is the floor of the third ventricle. The surface of each cerebral hemisphere is richly folded. Each inward fold, or sulcus, and each outward fold, or gyrus, has a name. But here we'll name only two, the central and the lateral sulci. This is the lateral sulcus. It's very deep. It extends all the way round to here on the underside. Here's the medial end of the lateral sulcus in the intact brain. The lateral sulcus separates the frontal lobe above from the temporal lobe below. This long sulcus running upwards and backwards is the central sulcus. It's the only one that runs all the way to the medial surface of the hemisphere. The cerebral hemisphere is described as consisting of four lobes: the frontal, temporal, and occipital lobes that we've mentioned already, and the parietal lobe. Between the frontal lobe and its neighbors, the central and lateral sulci form natural boundaries. The other boundaries are somewhat arbitrary. Here are the four lobes on the medial surface: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. The sloping underside of the occipital lobe conforms to the upward slope of the tentorium. Here are the two temporal lobes, seen from below. This part of the tip of the temporal lobe is the uncus. The uncus lies just above the tentorial incisure, which is here. Here on the underside of the frontal lobe is the olfactory tract. It ends in the olfactory bulb, from which the fibers of the first cranial nerve, the olfactory nerve, emerge. Each cerebral hemisphere contains a cavity, the lateral ventricle, that's filled with cerebrospinal fluid. The lateral ventricle has an anterior horn, a body, a posterior horn, and an inferior horn. The anterior horn is in the frontal lobe, the body is in the parietal lobe, the posterior horn is in the occipital lobe, and the inferior horn curls downward and forward into the temporal lobe. To see where the lateral ventricle communicates with the third ventricle, we'll go round to a medial view. The communication is here, at the interventricular foramen. To see how the lateral ventricle, the third ventricle, and the fourth ventricle are connected, we'll look at a brain that's been divided in the midline. Here's a midline section through the third ventricle. Here's the third ventricle. This strand of vascular tissue in the roof of the ventricle is the choroid plexus, which produces cerebrospinal fluid. Here's the interventricular foramen, opening into the lateral ventricle. The choroid plexus passes through the foramen and continues into the lateral ventricle. The cerebrospinal fluid that's formed in the lateral and third ventricles passes through this narrow passage, the cerebral aqueduct, and into the fourth ventricle. Fluid leaves the fourth ventricle through three openings: the lateral apertures, the right one is in the depths of this recess, and the medial aperture, which is in the midline, here. It's easier to visualize the medial opening in this dissection. Here it is, in the inferior medullary velum. The lateral openings are here. The medial opening comes out here, between the cerebellum and the medulla. The lateral opening on each side comes out just below the cerebellar peduncles. These openings lead to the subarachnoid space surrounding the brain and spinal cord. We'll see where the cerebrospinal fluid is absorbed later in this tape when we look at the blood vessels. We'll return now to the underside of the cerebrum to look at the structures that form the floor of the third ventricle, which is here. Here's the optic chiasm. Behind it, this tubular structure that's been divided is the infundibulum, the stalk of the pituitary gland. These two projections are the mammillary bodies. To see how the pituitary gland is attached to the brain, we look at an intact specimen divided in the midline. Here's the floor of the third ventricle. Here's the optic chiasm. Here's the infundibulum, leading down to the pituitary gland or hypophysis. The anterior and posterior parts of the pituitary gland are quite distinct. The pituitary gland sits in the pituitary fossa. The pituitary fossa bulges downwards into the roof of the sphenoid sinus. This area just above the pituitary stalk is the hypothalamus.
Yeah, hope you have enjoyed the video. Is it clear to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Right. So now that is the actual healthy brain, what you have seen the healthy brain, and it's only few anatomical structures that I showed. Now let us see if something happens to the brain. So what happens? So let us see one or two. One is stroke. The other one is I think Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Let us see briefly, very briefly. Okay. So this is the stroke. When we say it's also called as brain attack or stroke. So this happens once the blood supply to the brain is lost or temporarily. So, for example, if somebody met with an accident, blood will lose. That also causes the stroke, or some of the blood vessels are occluded. That also causes the stroke. Now, let us see. So, this is also called a stroke or the cerebral ischemia. Ischemia is depriving of the oxygen. So, this area particularly, this is the this is the called as the motor cortex area. So, where the from the carotid artery, from the heart, carotid artery, blood supply will go to the brain. From there, actually, if there is any clot here, so this particular area will be damaged. So this is one way. The other one is called as the hemorrhagic stroke. If somebody has a continuous headache or continuous hypertension, so the BP is very high. If they are not under medication, if they don't take medication, what happens is called as the ballooning. So blood vessels will become a balloon-like structure, and finally that gives the continuous headache. Then, if that is not treated, so that will burst open and it causes the hemorrhagic stroke. So, this is another kind of stroke. So, stroke can be a devastating impact of everybody. So, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 6 men will have the stroke at some point of their lives. Now, many scientists or many political leaders are attacked by the stroke. So the stroke normally affects the normally after 60 years or 55 years. So from 55 years of the age, stroke impact or stroke possibilities they will increase with the age. And by any chance, if somebody has the diabetes or the hypertension, so that will also add it to the misery. Now, the stroke is the second leading cause of the death and disability. So, some people may die, some people will be paralyzed entire life. So, this is the responsible for the 4.5 million strokes in India. So, there are 800 per 1 lakh population in the case of Indian population. Now, the brain is extremely sensitive to reduction of the oxygen availability and suffers energy failure and from consequent irreversible damage with the minutes of the ischemia. So, within minutes, when the stroke occurs, cells will die in the brain. So this is what you have seen in the brain. So this is called as the central sulcus. Central sulcus. This is called as the motor cortex area. So in the stroke patients, normally this particular area is damaged. So this particular area controls the legs and hands movements. Legs and hands movements. So once this is damaged, so that other side of the body will be paralyzed. So this is the exactly picture that showing that one. So if this here is the clot, here is the clot. So if that clot, this clot prevents the circulation to this particular area, then this particular area is damaged. So the person will have this some of the facial expressions are like drooping face and arms weakness. Suddenly people will say that my hand is unable to I am unable to raise my hand or leg, unable to walk, speech difficulty. So then he has to be admitted. So fortunately, there is a medication is available if the patient is admitted in the hospital within 3.5 hours. So then they inject the it's called a thrombolytic clot busters. So thrombolytic clot busters, it's called as the TPA, plasminogen activator that goes to this place and this dissolves the clot and restores the circulation. So that is within 3.5 hours only. Otherwise, but in Indian condition, it is very difficult for the patient, especially in the rural people coming to the city and having it to the big hospital. Now, so this is the hemorrhagic stroke and the transient ischemic. So this is ischemic stroke. This is normally when person is paralyzed. This is a hemorrhagic stroke. So for this, there is a window period is there within 3.5 hours. There is a possibility of treatment. Whereas in the case of the hemorrhagic stroke, nothing can be done. Nothing can be done. Only patient will be admitted. If it is superficial, as we have seen the meninges and also superior type, peripheral sort of region of the brain, if there is any clots are there, they can be removed. That's called as the hematoma. Hematoma will be removed. But whereas if it is in the within the brain, intracerebral hemorrhage. So nothing can be done. We have to wait and watch. This happens only many people when they met with an accident. So some people without helmet, they go and they hit the divide, especially two-wheelers and all. So that happens in the case of these accidents. And the other one is the transient ischemic attacks. Transient ischemic attacks is, so normally in all our brains, all of us will have a small ischemic attacks, very small, very minute, it occurs very few seconds and it will disappear. So that sometimes when we get headaches and all, constant headaches and all. So sometimes these cells will die and it will recover immediately. So that's called as the transient ischemic attacks. Now, so this is how the blood vessel is blocked here, blocked here, and the supply is. So here it is in this case, the blood vessel is actually hemorrhage is occurring, and blood is oozing into the area, particular brain region, and that brain region will be dead. And so this is a atherosclerotic blood vessel, where the blood vessel is becoming thickened because of the fat accumulation and atherosclerotic sclerotic plaques and all. So this makes the blood to clot. So this goes and blocks this particular region, small regions. So here is the block actually. So certain things they also makes the blood vessels to block or rupture, causing the stroke. So this is the normal brain, as you have seen earlier pictures. And this is the stroke brain. So this particular region is dead actually. So this particular region is dead. So after the patient died, they have taken the brain out and they checked this one, and this particular region is lost, completely lost. That's why he got the complete paralysis, and recovery is impossible. Now, if you take the brain pathophysiology of the penumbra, ischemic place, it's called as the central place is called as the core region, and peripheral core is called as the penumbra, like a halo around the moon or the sun. So this is the core region, and around it is called penumbra. So this core region cells, they die within few minutes, but whereas in the case of the penumbra cells, they are not dead, but they are not functional. So that means if the surgical intervention is there or medical intervention is there, so those cells may survive and the damage will be limited. So when there is a stroke, what happens is so there is a lot of inflammation occurs and blood-brain barrier will be damaged and immune system will be overactive, and that attempts to repair, and it has a limited capacity for the brain to repair. So this is the actually place called as the core region, and this is the penumbra region. So in the core region, most of the cells, they die of the necrosis because sudden energy falls, sudden ATP depletes, sudden oxygen and glucose depletes, that causes the necrosis. Whereas in the case of the penumbra region, still the energy and oxygen is available. These cells, if they are not rescued, they die of the apoptosis. And we have the animal models. Normally we make the animal models. So when we occlude this particular one by a nylon monofilament, so animal will make a circular movements, and animal will have the stroke, and then we will cut open and we'll use for the various pathological studies. So if you take this one, so these are the cells. These are the cells in the normal brain. You can see very normal. But whereas in the case of the stroke region, these are the cells. So these cells are going in becoming a necrotic cells. These are all the apoptotic cells. Apoptotic cells. So if you find any, if you need anything, you can ask me in between also. You need not wait for the until at the end. So these are the apoptotic cells. These are the necrotic cells. So this stain identifies the apoptotic marker. So it's the apoptotic marker. This stains the apoptotic cells. And so whenever there is a stroke is there, actually what happens, the blood-brain barrier is damaged. Once the blood-brain barrier is damaged, immune cells will enter into that one. So like cytotoxic T lymphocytes, they enter into the brain, and they try the role of the cytotoxic T lymphocytes is normally to kill the pathogens in the brain or to kill the infected cells. But during this process, they will also kill the normal cells also accidentally. So this is actually normal normal mice. So normal mice, when the blood-brain barrier is disrupted, if you inject the Evans blue dye into the animal, this complete animal will become blue, but not the brain. So if you inject this Evans blue, these animals become very blue. You can see this is the normal and this is the. But if this is a normal mice, if you cut open the brain, you can see the brain is like a pinkish in color. So, but any chance blood-brain barrier is damaged, so this Evans blue will leak into the brain and brain will become blue. So this is the litmus test to test the whether the blood-brain barrier is intact or not. So then, so if you cut open the stroke animal, you can see this side is the blue. That indicates this side the blood-brain barrier is damaged and events blue entered into the one. So this is the called as the litmus test to see the whether the brain is damaged or not, especially in the case of stroke. So these are the number of the cells that you can see. What I wanted to show you here is the so CD8 positive cells. These are the cells. These are the immune cells. When they enter into the stroke region, so they kill all the normal cells. So wherever there is a cell is there, cells are dying here. Cells are dying here. Cells are dying here. Cells are dying here. So in this paper, what we have projected. So when there is a blood-brain barrier is damaged in the case of the stroke patients, so that normal cells also will die along with that over a period of time. So stroke occurs in a one day, but its damage continues for another 4 to 5 days. So that can be addressed in the case of the patients admitted in a early treatment. So we also checked with the human cases when we got the samples from the Nimhans Bangalore. So these are the cases we got it. So when we checked this one, we also got the similar results in the case of the humans. So when there is a stroke occurs, blood-brain barrier is damaged, and also the cells are dying. So over a period of time. So therefore, if we can intervene, so some of the cells can be rescued, and patient can be with minimum damage, patient can survive. So this is in the case of the stroke. So you have any doubts in this, or shall we continue? Or we'll wait for the last.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, we'll continue and we'll wait in the last. Okay, if you have anything, please note down. So we will discuss at the end. Yeah. Now
Sure,
the
sir.
other neurodegenerative disease is the Parkinson's disease. Most of you, as you are teachers, you must be teaching at some time or the other to the students. So Parkinson's disease. This is another neurodegenerative disease. So you have seen this man. This gentleman is a Muhammad Ali. Is a boxer. So when he was young and active, these two photographs shows that one. So he photograph with the Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan. So and also another American president, George Bush. So then his daughter actually. So he got the Parkinson's disease ultimately. So because of the boxing, when there is a constant hits on the head, so some regions in the brain got damaged. So finally he got into Parkinson's disease. He was at the end of the day he was unable to walk. He cannot do on his own things. So his daughter used to help him. So everywhere. So the Parkinson's disease symptoms are actually so they cannot stand properly. It's called as the tremors. Tremors. It's a the hands and legs. They movement. It's called as the if they stop doing anything, it's called as the resting tremors. They cannot rest the hand. If they keep the hand on the table, it will shake. So when these people go to the doctor, he will say that keep your hand on the air, keep it for a while. So then they cannot keep it straight. They will tremors. So this postural disability will be there in the case of the Parkinson's patient. So this is a progressive neurodegenerative disorders occurs causes the motor and the non-motor dysfunction. So motor is the movement. So this is characterized by the dopaminergic neurons. So the dopaminergic neurons are present in the substantia nigra. So these neurons will die because of they die. The dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is less in availability, and that is an important one for the movement to keep up the movement of the person. So actually, this video is not working. I tried. This is a Parkinson's patient I wanted to show, but I'm sorry, I cannot. It's not working. Now, so actually, this is the actual place called as the caudate thalamus and subthalamic server. This is the substantia nigra. Actually, this is the region where these cells are dying in the case of the Parkinson's patient. So this is the region. This is called as substantia nigra. This is the normal one. You can see this is thick in color. Thick in color indicates the number of neurons present. Whereas in the case of the down one, so these cells they died. So when these cells are they die, so the number of dopaminergic neurons they die, they cannot secrete the adequate amount of the dopamine neurotransmitter that is causing the disease. Now, what is the pathophysiology of it actually? So, in the case of the dopamine, normally when the patient is admitted in the hospital, they inject the levodopa. This is the neurotransmitter. So they don't do it directly dopamine because dopamine cannot enter into the blood-brain barrier. Therefore, they inject the levodopa. Levodopa can enter into the brain, and this releases the dopamine in the brain. So there is a one more treatment called as the deep brain stimulation. They keep the electrode in the substantia nigra region, and they keep the pacemaker in the body. So this stimulates the cells in the substantia nigra region to secrete the dopamine. So therefore, though the number of cells are less, they have to overwork and over release the dopamine so that they can keep up the patient stability. And so, what are the potential mechanisms of the neuroprotection? So, neuroprotection potential mechanisms are one has to protect from the apoptosis. Apoptosis should be reduced, and this is the ROS reactive oxygen species. So, reactive oxygen species actually under stress condition are normally when with the food habits are not really good, like intoxication or toxicants that they enter or pesticides they enter. So, enormous number of reasons are there. So, they releases the free radicals. These free radicals enter into the brain that also kills the cells, including neurons. So one has to give protection from the neurotoxins. So without our knowledge, actually, we'll be consuming a lot of toxins. For example, when we go to the very, very good sweet shops and all, we eat a lot of sweets which are in very, very colored. These color substance itself is a toxins. Actually, we may not realize that one. So these toxins, when they enter into the body, our system will normally detoxify. By any chance, if that cannot detoxify completely, that causes the brain damage. And also, this brain damage, if somebody gets a Parkinson's disease or the Alzheimer's disease, the symptoms starts at least 10 years before. Symptoms starts at least 10 years before to accumulate the symptoms. So then the disease will appear. So one has to increase the neurotropic factors. These are the positive factors. If they increase, cells will survive. So this is the Alzheimer's. This is the Parkinson's. Now let us move on to the Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease is the named after the Alzheimer's. Is a scientist. So can anybody tell me what are the symptom of Alzheimer's? How can you define Alzheimer's disease? Can anybody?
Sir, memory loss, sir.
How can you say that if somebody is there, if you see somebody, can you say that he has? See, I forgot something in the morning in my house and I came. Can we say that I have Alzheimer's disease?
Sir, it's a progressive disorder, sir.
Right, it's progressive disorder. But how we can say that so he has a see normal memory loss is different and Alzheimer's is different. So how can you differentiate that?
Even small things cannot be memorized, sir.
Okay, yeah, one way it is correct. Yeah. Any other?
Sir, they forget multiple things like even the names, name of the place, small events, small talks, everything they started to forget.
Yeah, this is another thing. Well, we'll give a simple example what that is. So, if forgetting is not an Alzheimer's disease, it's a dementia, normal dementia over a period of time. So that's why the people will retire at 60 years or 65 years age because neurodegenerative onsets for everybody after 60s, everybody's memory may not be intact. Very few people will be there even at 80 years also they can remember everything, but in general people. So Alzheimer's disease is if somebody says that somebody forgets that he has a wife, he is married, he has a children, he forgets that. If we show his son, he will just look into him, that's all. He says that there is no connection at all. That's how the Alzheimer's disease is. So simple example is you must be seeing in the newspapers that one old man of 70 years old man went out of the house, he did not come back. Right? Have you seen that kind of announcements in the newspapers? So that means that
Yes,
means
sir, sir, sir.
that means he forgot his house. After going out, he forgot that there is a house for him, there is a family for him. He forgets, that's all. So, simple test for Alzheimer's disease patient is give him some money, ask him to come. Simple test. They cannot come. They cannot come. So this is the Alzheimer's disease. It's a really, though it's a mild to moderate to severe disease is there, but this is really pathetic. Age is one of the culprits, and food habits are other culprits. So let us see. Be simple. What is the pathology of this Alzheimer's disease? Once considered it as a rare disorder, now Alzheimer's disease is seen in the public, especially in India. We did not see many Alzheimer's disease patients earlier. Now we are able to see. Can you tell me the reason? Anybody? Just guess.
Lifestyle changes.
What is that? You are right, madam. Tell me.
Change in life.
Lifestyle and food.
Not lifestyle, it's lifespan. Lifespan increased in India. Earlier, people maximum they used to live 58 or 50, 60 maximum. Now it is 75 plus. So actually, this is the Alzheimer's disease is mostly the age related. Only it comes out of only 60 or 65 years. So now people are able to live for a longer period, and now the Alzheimer's disease cases are coming up, and there are so many Alzheimer's associations also formed in the country. So now it's a old age is the actual culprit for this kind of disease. Now, Alzheimer's disease is an irreversible progressive brain disease. You see, this is irreversible. You cannot. So slowly they destroys the memory and thinking skills. So the risk of AD is increases with age. In most people with AD, symptoms first appear at the age of 60. AD is not part of the normal aging. AD is not part of the normal aging. It's a completely it shows. So if you find that symptoms are at the age of 60, the disease must have initiated at the age of 50 itself. So there normally we cannot treat that as the disease symptom. AD is the most common cause of the dementia among people aged over 65. Scientists estimate that there are around 4.5 million people they have AD. For every 5 years of age beyond 65, the percentage of people with AD doubles. You can see that. So in 2050, it's estimated as the 13.2 million in only in one particular country. Now, what is this pathology? So this is there is a limbic system is there actually. So which I did not show you because due to lack of time. There is a limbic system. That limbic system is actually affects this one, the Alzheimer's disease. To understand Alzheimer's disease, it's important to know a bit about the brain. So this is the brain. We have already seen that one. Now, so this is actually this limbic system actually this is a thalamus. Thalamus is like a relay station. I give you an example like a relay station. So if somebody is from Hyderabad, they must be knowing about the Malakpet where they have the TV towers. Big towers are there. So normally when we are watching the TV, that's from the studio this goes to the tower. From the tower it comes to our TV. So thalamus is like a tower actually. Every information from the body goes to the thalamus. This thalamus sort out the information where it should go to the different regions of the brain. So this takes the information again to the thalamus. So then it will give to them. So for example, if I ask you one question, this goes to the from your ears it goes to the auditory to the goes to the thalamus. Then I will ask you one question. That question it goes to the cortex and it gets the answer. It goes back to the thalamus and it gives to the mouth to report. So all this happens within a fraction of a second. So this thalamus is a relay station. So this is called as the hippocampus. So this is called as the hippocampus. So this hippocampus is actually called as the memory cells. Memory is the seat of, this is also seat of memory. But this is not actually, this will not store the memory. People will misunderstand that. Hippocampus is a processor. In your computer, you will have the processor. Hippocampus is a processor. Every information comes from thalamus to the hippocampus. This processes the information and this stores somewhere else. We do not know where exactly this is stores. This stores. And by any chance, if the person with the hippocampus is damaged, so hippocampus once person is damaged, one person was admitted in the hospital. So the people are treating. Then his parents and his wife and his children, everybody came and all are he discussed with them everything as done. So before that, I think doctor came and talked to him and he asked him to take some tablets. So then when the next time doctor came, he asked, why did you come? He asked, did you take the tablet? He said, no, he didn't tell me that one. So that indicates that the new memories cannot be formed once the hippocampus is damaged. So that means old memories are intact, but not new memories. So this is a kind of processor. These two are, this is the region actually damaged first initially, then it damages the cortex. So cortex is the place where intellectual abilities are stored in this cortex. That cortex is also damaged. Now let us see simple things like,
వాళ్ళు
so this is
డిపార్ట్మెంట్
the,
నుంచి కూడా సైన్
for example,
కావాలా
if we take the healthy brain and the diseased brain, so this is one half is healthy brain, let us say, so this is the diseased brain. So this is the dying neuron here. So these are called as the plaques. Plaques are formed. These plaques, they kill the neurons. So now let us see here. So let us see one or two.
అసలు బస్ పాస్ లో ఓన్లీ
So
వైట్
this
తీసుకోవాలి
cerebral
కావాలి సార్
hemisphere. So there are three main players are there in this region. Cerebral hemisphere, where the sensory information is received from the outside the body's
ఆకులు
process.
పోనప్పుడు
This part of the brain
పాలసుద్దులు
controls the
అన్ని
voluntary
డిపార్ట్మెంట్
movements and regulates the consciousness, thought, and mental ability. It accounts for the 85% of the brain weight. It consists of two hemispheres connected by the corpus callosum, covered by the outer layer called the cerebral cortex. So this region is affected. Then cerebellum, it's in charge of the balance and coordination. It takes 10% of the,
మళ్ళీ
so
ఇట్లా
these are
సార్
receives the information from the
నన్ను
ears,
పిలుస్తారు
eyes, and muscles and joints for them. So and also the
నన్ను
body
పిలుస్తారు నా
movements.
పేరు ఉండదు
Body
పేరు నా
movement. So
పేరు
I will give one example. Some of you, if you learn
పేపర్
something
ఇచ్చేది
at
వాళ్ళు
10th class, you may forget now. But in the 10th class, when you know how to cycling, you will not forget entire your life. If somebody knows swimming, you will not forget entire your life. So that is because of this cerebellum. Now, the other one is the brainstem. This connects the spinal cord with the brain. It relays the message from the muscle to the skin, and it controls the autonomic nervous system. It controls autonomic. Hope some of you must be knowing when a person is hanged.
ఈపీటీఆర్ అయితే దారుణం సార్
When a
ఎన్ని
person
లక్షల
is hanged,
పర్వతాలకు శాంక్షన్
what happens? Can anybody tell me? He will die instantaneously. Why he dies?
సార్ అదే అర్థం కాదు ఫిజిక్స్ వాళ్ళకి
Does not reach brain.
No, if somebody is hanged with a rope on the neck, what happens?
ఫిజిక్స్ ప్లాంట్ మీద చేస్తున్నాడు కదా గ్రీన్ టీ మీద చేస్తున్నాడు గ్రీన్ టీ మీద చేస్తున్నాడు
Anybody, just guess.
జస్ట్
As a
అదే
scientist,
జస్ట్
you should
మొక్క
know
పేరు
that.
తెలిసి తాను ఏమైనా చేసుకోవచ్చు అన్నాడు
Okay. So fine. If it is
మీకు
interactive
ఓన్లీ
session, we
మొక్కల
could have
పేరు
done that.
తెలుసు
So what happens is people
నానో
will think that
చేయడం తెలుసు
when there is a neck region is squeezed, people always
అదే
think
అదే
that
ఆయన
he will
ఉద్దేశం
not
అదే
get the respiration and therefore he dies. That is wrong. This is called as
నిర్ణయం
the
అంటాంది
cervical
నీళ్ళు
dislocation.
పోపియండి కాస్త
This
నీళ్ళు
brainstem
పోపియండి
will
అని
be cut.
పోపించినాము 4-5 రోజులు
Suddenly, when
అయినా
a
ఫస్ట్
70 kg body hangs from the neck, this will dislocate. It's
పోపియండి
called as
పోపియండి
cervical dislocation. This is called cervical dislocation, and this is the place where the heart is regulated. Heart is under heart, blood pressure and breathing is regulated. Suddenly, breathing and
అవును
heart
సార్
rate is
మరి వాళ్ళకి
stopped.
డబ్బులు ఇచ్చినప్పుడు సర్వైవల్
So then
వాళ్ళకి
person will
ఉండాలి
die.
కదా సార్
That is the reason. Normally, when we go to some houses or when it comes to when
ఏదో
our
చెత్త
children are
తీసుకుపోయి
there in the
వేసినట్టు
house, maybe at least in months of age old, people will try to pull them by holding the head. Don't allow them. That itself is a kind of hanging. Normally, they do that. They will not. Children will survive because their body weight is not that much to cut this brainstem. But that is wrong concept. Okay, so that's called as cervical dislocation, and this also affected in the case of the Alzheimer's patient. Once this is the final stage, actually, it goes once it reaches this place, person will die of these things.
కాదు సార్
This
ఈపీటీఆర్
this region is
ఫండ్స్
dying.
డబ్బులు కూడా వచ్చినాయి వాళ్ళకి
Then
స్టూడెంట్స్
the
మరి
other one is
అనుభవించాలి
the
ఇష్టం వాళ్ళ
hippocampus,
స్టూడెంట్స్
thalamus,
ఉపయోగించుకోవాలి మరి
hypothalamus, and limbic
ఆ
system. So
ప్రాజెక్ట్స్
these
లో
are all the
ఉన్నాం
ones.
అనుకున్నాను ఉపయోగించుకోవాలి
Hippocampus is the short-term memories
1
are
year
converted
అనుకున్నాం
into
మనం
long-term
కావాలి
memories. Thalamus receives the sensory and limbic information sent to
ఇప్పుడు
the
50,000
cortex.
సార్ 50,000 ఏం ఖర్చు
Cortex
పెట్టిస్తారు
and hypothalamus monitors the activities, control the body internal clock like sleep and thirsty, hungry, etc. will be
వాణి
maintained.
ప్రసాద్ మేడం
And limbic
ఈమె
system it
బాగా
controls the
దగ్గర కదా
emotions,
పరిచయం కదా
instinctive behavior, all these things. So therefore, person will have the
అప్పుడు నీకు నా
disability of this. So this is the normal brain you can see. This is the Alzheimer's patient brain. So this is called as the shrinkage of the brain. You can see there are lot of gaps are there. Lot of gaps are there. Here there are no gaps at all. That means there are so many cells they died. Because of the cells are died, the brain has become a
ఎటువంటి
it's
సెల్
a
ఉంది
shrunken brain.
ఆయన
Brain
బాలభాస్కర్
is
ఉన్నాడు కదా
shrink is there.
కాదు
So now
చంద్ర
what happens?
ఆయన
This is the normal brain you can see. So this is the Alzheimer's brain. Alzheimer's brain.
కెమిస్ట్ కెమిస్ట్ ఆయన
See, so this is the ventricle is the normal size. This is the enlarged. And as the space is increasing, means that means cells are dying. So this is the place for the language. This place for memory. These are all cells when they die,
ఈయనకన్నా ముందు
they
కెమిస్ట్
lose
ఆయన
this
సార్
kind of
ఆయన
functions.
చంద్ర ఏదో
Now,
వస్తుంది.
so what is the pathology of this one? So this is inside neurons. There are billions of neurons are there. The axons makes the contact with the other neurons. So this continuously continuous process, and this is the
మార్నింగ్ సార్ ఏం సంగతులు?
end feet of the neuron. It's a
బ్రెయిన్
post
స్ట్రామింగ్ శిక్షణ అయిపోతుంది. బ్రెయిన్
neuron
బ్రెయిన్ స్ట్రోక్
axon.
అయిపోతుంది.
So this releases the neurotransmitter. This goes to the postsynaptic neuron. These receptors will release. That's how the information is passed here. So number of neurons they contact the billions have they have the
మొత్తం
healthy neurons. They
స్ట్రెస్
have the contacts with the several neurons. One neuron connects with the several thousands of the neurons. Now the plaques and tangles are there. So in the case of this one, so this is the normal healthy cells you can see, but these are the cells that they are dying because of the accumulation of the tangles and all. These cells are dying. So this is a normal one, but this also may die slowly. Now, what is happening? The brains of the people have with AD have the abundance of two abnormal structures. Two abnormal structures called plaques and tangles. They are beta amyloid plaques. It's a dense deposits of the protein, that cellular material that accumulates outside and around the nerve cells. And the other one is the neurofibrillary tangles, which are twisted fibers that built up inside the neurons. This is the twisted fibers. So these are the two pathological. One is beta amyloid plaques are accumulated. The other one is the neurofibrillary tangles. Let us see the next one. So you can see this one. This is the beta amyloid plaques. So this is the normally APP molecule. So this is actually enzyme will cut beta amyloid will cut this enzyme into pieces, and they beta amyloid plaques are accumulated. Okay, APP sticks through the neuronal membrane. Enzymes cut the APP into fragments of protein, including beta amyloid. Beta amyloid fragments come together in clumps to form the plaques. In AD, many of these clumps form, disrupting the work of the neurons. This affects the hippocampus and other areas of the cerebral cortex. So this is how the beta amyloid plaques are formed. And in the case of the neurofibrillary tangles, as especially we know at when we have the girl child, so we buy the pearls and we stitch them with some kind of thread. So imagine that these threads are removed, all these are collapsed here. So these are all the actually tangles are clumped. You see, these are the neurofibrillary tangles. So they're all clumped here. You can see here this is come. So this is called as the neurofibrillary tangles. So they become a clumped here. So neurons have a internal support structure partly made up of the microtubules. These microtubules are called tau, helps the stabilize the microtubules, tau protein. So this is the tau protein. This stabilizes this one. When the tau protein is changes, this causes the microtubules to collapse, and these micro tau protein will clump together. So because of this accumulation of the tangles, neurons will die. So here this is the healthy neuron. When there is Alzheimer's disease, these are all accumulations, and the cell they cut off. Actually, this axon is actually simply they are cutting off. Now, when they go for the any MRI or CT scan, so this is the normal brain. So when there is a reddishness, that indicates the brain is very active. Active sites of the brain.
ఆయన
Here,
నూరుద్దీన్
active sites
కాలం
of the
ఎవరు
brain are
గుర్తొచ్చారు?
shrunken. So it's a very limited, very
నూరుద్దీన్ ఖాన్
limited.
దగ్గర
So that
అది
means
లేదు కదా.
Alzheimer is all set with the patient.
నిన్న
Now, the
నూరుద్దీన్ ఖాన్ ఏం
preclinical is
చేశారు?
the signs of AD are first noticed in the entorhinal cortex, then proceed to the hippocampus. So here and here is the in the initial stage it will have. So when they initially 10 years before, if they take the MRI, they can see the changes here that can. So the changes can begin 10 to 20 years. So before symptoms appear, memory loss is the first sign of Alzheimer's disease and mild to moderate. So the AD spreads through the brain. The cerebral cortex begins to shrink as more and more neurons stop working and die. And mild AD signs can include the memory loss, confusion, trouble handling money, poor judgment, mood changes, and increased anxiety. And moderate AD signs can include the increased memory loss and confusion, problems recognizing people, difficulty with language and thoughts, restlessness, agitation, wandering, and repetitive states. So people will keep on saying something, whatever they said, they repeat the same thing. So that is the first symptom actually. It's a moderate. When they come to the severe, in severe ADs, extreme shrinkage occurs in the brain. Patients are completely dependent on others for care. Symptoms can include the weight loss, seizures, skin infections, groaning, moaning, and grunting, increased sleeping, loss of bladder control and bowel control. Death usually occurs from the aspiration of the pneumonia or other infections. Caregivers only can turn to the help the palliative stage. So it's only, so there is no treatment for this disease. Only people have to help them to uh, give the symptoms very less effect. So who are the caregivers? Caregivers are definitely spouse and also the children and the grandchildren. So when they are with the children and grandchildren, so they will be more. So people should not misjudge them, or when they are behaving differently, they cannot think that they are doing wantedly. It is the part of the disease. And also, not only apart from that, sons and brothers, sisters, and other friends, neighbors. So these are all community should help them to take care of themselves. And so now this is over. If you have any questions, we can have. But I have a small story, then we will end up here. So hope all of you are there. Are you there? All of you?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hope it is interesting. So now let us
Yes, sir.
end up with a small story. So there are friends like all of you studied in somewhere. Maybe let us assume that they somewhere in the university where the ocean is there. Okay. So they studied maybe 20 years back. They realized that they wanted to have a alumni meeting. They all met once. Okay. So they met here. A group of guys, all aged about 20, 40, discussed where they should meet for the lunch. So they're all met in a particular, they wanted to meet at a place like, let us say, Vishakhapatnam, Vizag, which is near to us. It has the ocean. So they wanted to meet, and they discussed where to go to, where to meet, which hotel they wanted to meet. So it was agreed that they would meet at the Ocean View restaurant because the waiters were very pretty. Okay, so remember, this is the age. You always see the statement and compare with that of their age. So this is the 40 years age. Normally they do this. So then let us see. Then 10 years later, at the age of 50, the friends once again discussed where they should meet. So once in 10 years they are meeting. So again they discussed that where to meet. So at the age of 50, so they agreed to meet the same restaurant, Ocean View restaurant, so that they can see the ocean. And because the food was given was very good and wine selection was excellent. So there is a drink and food is good. So now their age is 50. Okay, their age is 50. Now let us see, 10 years later, at the age of 60, the friends once again discussed where they should meet for the lunch. Finally, it was agreed that they would meet at the Ocean View restaurant, only, same restaurant. So why they should meet now? Can anybody guess reason?
They can remember easily.
So at the age of 60. Okay.
For memories, going back to the memories.
Let us see. The Ocean View restaurant, because they could dine in peace and quiet, and the restaurant had a beautiful view of the ocean. So until 60, they don't see the beauty of the ocean. They see the beauty in different places, different things. Okay. Now it is at the age of 60. So that's how the age always matters when they go. Now let us see the next what happens. 10 years later, again at the age of 70, the friends discussed where they should meet for lunch. So again, they discussed the same thing. They will meet the Ocean View restaurant. Now, can you tell me what is the reason?
That one only very well known place, I think, sir.
Any guess?
Because it is connected with the childhood, I suppose.
No, age matters. Now let us see. Finally, it was agreed to meet the same place because the restaurant has a wheelchair accessible and had an elevator. So that is the age dependent requirements. When you age, actually requirements will change. Okay, let us see once again what happens next. The 10 years later, at the age of 80, the friends discussed where they should meet for lunch. Now tell me what could be the reason. Now they are in 80.
In home.
Hmm?
Because they have all the above facilities.
Okay. Then the facilities are gone now. They are there. But any other additional requirement? Okay, here is the guess. Finally, they are agreed to meet the Ocean View restaurant only, but the reason is hope all of you got it.
Yes, sir.
So they forgot that they had been there earlier. So that is the age. Okay, so that is the people. Now you can see this cartoon. Instead of operating the TV, he is operating with the remote with the mirror. So that is the age-related dementia. Okay, so this we have a actually society for neurochemistry society in Hyderabad University. We conduct the meetings at different places every year, and also train the students for students and the faculty for the neuroscience workshop. Will conduct it. We will conduct workshop on that. If anybody wants to see the details and join the society and be active member of the society and participate in the conferences, you can check the society website and or you can contact. Thank you. Now we can I can take some questions if anybody wants.
Good morning, sir.
Tell me. Yes, please.
Good morning, sir. Can we prevent or postpone this type of dementia or Alzheimer's?
Yes,
Sir,
certainly that can be done. Certainly that can be done. So, see now what the doctors are say doing is once the patient is admitted, they will not say that this can be cured. They will say they delay the process. They delay the symptoms by giving some of the neuroprotectants.